realms of consciousness. This is the 13th hour. The elusive UFOs. Billion years ago, this great, magnificent planet was just a particle of matter in the vastness of this universe. Today, this Earth hosts the lives of millions of human beings. And yet, it was only 1 million years ago, a pre-human-like nomad began to roam across this very land, an ocean, and now the sky. We know so little about ourselves of the past. The 6,000 or 7,000 years we do know about, that we have discovered so far, is only a tiny thumbnail sketch of life on Earth in this eternal lapse of cosmic time. As I look around and think about the progress in our world today, from jet planes to moon rockets in only about 100 years, I can't help but wonder about other worlds out there and their progress. Perhaps there are others who have developed beyond what our own earthly imaginations can perceive. Maybe there are other space beings who already know how to merge together the great expanses of time and the far distances of space. Maybe there are others who have been to the Earth and gone even before us. But why did they come to Earth? Was it out of curiosity about life on our planet?
Knowledge, science, and finally surviving. When they left their home planet, they knew quite evidently that when they came back, their own civilization may not exist anymore, because there is a time difference between rocket crew and space travelers and starting planet. It could be that at home 100 or 200,000 years are gone, so there is nobody there anymore to give the answer. What have we seen in space? What have we found out in space? Have we found other life? There is nobody to answer it. That's why they created all over the universe new intelligent forms of lives. That the own development goes on, the own knowledge goes on.
I think people that have perhaps read your books or know about you or been to your lectures would like to know perhaps more about you and how you got into this exploration, because I know you've been doing it since you were what, 19?
22 years now.
22 years. Well, how did you actually get into this exploration? What drew you into questioning all of these theories of history?
Religion starts in high school. I had a very Catholic background, and well, I had my doubts, as young people should have. And I asked then my teacher, what should I do? And he was the guy who told me, well, if you want to understand Christianity, you must first understand the Old Testament, because that's the base for Christianity. You know, Nancy, Jesus had to come because there is an original sin. But this original sin happens in the Old Testament. So first, you have to know the Old Testament. And exactly in the Old Testament, Moses speaks several times in plural. He speaks of the gods instead of singular God. He says, for example, let us make man after our own image. Why us? Why our? Why not I? Or Moses 6, and the sons of the gods saw that the daughter of man were beauty, and they took them to wife. Anyhow, so this plural was the reason for me to look into other holy books of mankind, into mythologies of the Sumerians, the Red Indians, the Hindus, just to ask myself, what do they say? and they all speak in plural. There is not one singular. So that was the starting point for me.
Well, you know, I would sort of call you a New Age explorer, and this word is thrown around a lot. I mean, with the comet Cahutek and, you know, the age of Aquarius, and people are all talking about this. But why do you suppose at this particular time, like yourself, more and more people are beginning to say, well, I don't know if I believe what's written in history anymore? Is it a feeling that's arising at this time? What do you call yourself?
Well, I'm a kind of explorer, and I'm certainly a specialist in my field, because what I'm doing since 22 years, if you do something a long time, you become a specialist. But on the other hand, I'm not an archaeologist, I'm not a scientist with our today's measurement. I have the feeling that we are in a generation where everyone starts to understand that man's brain is capable to do much more things than we ever believed. In antiquity, we said to some things, that's a miracle. Now we start to know or to understand that miracles just not happened. Something makes what we call the miracle. And man's brain, because we all have ancestors. I mean, you have your father and mother, and you have your grandfather and mother, and so on. Man's brain is the product of a developing of a long, long series. So, in our brain, we feel that what a part of science or history tells us is not true, because we know inside it was otherwise. In a way, we have participated in the past.
Well, in some of your theories, you believe that our memories are now becoming extended more into our conscious reality.
Yeah.
Perhaps, would you say that maybe some of the information and some of the questioning comes from maybe another existence that you yourself have had in another lifetime that goes back millions of years?
Yeah, this is absolutely possible. I mean, it's a speculation, but it's absolutely possible, and I personally, I have good reasons to believe in this possibility, because I have my own experience with myself. When I'm dreaming in some moment of, you cannot tell it trance, but it's something like this, I'm going back myself, I'm going out of time. And I then part of something which is not today's realities. But you know, I know it was reality once.
Were you talking about that perhaps man has planted in his memory some things that is just now coming to light in our life, maybe of our past, who we were maybe in 1,000 years ago, 10,000, or maybe back in the Ice Age, if the theory exists that we were alive and well during that time as Homo sapiens. But in this film, The Chariot of the Gods, you can sort of bring to reality more some of the findings and theories. So let's take a look at that film and, you know, tell us about it. And
that's a good
what it
idea.
means.
I mean, we have a very short clipping here.
And what does it start out with?
Well, the film's title is Chariots of the Gods, that's the book's title. And we see all this, what you see very shortly here, in each detail, in full color, in a large screen. And we go into mathematical details, and we go into measurements and weights, and we provoke science. Movie, I show more or less everything which I speak about in the book, Chariots of the Gods. Important things like, for example, in Chariots of the Gods, I say that the Ark of the Covenant was some electric machinery that Moses could speak with the Lord by the Ark of the Covenant. And in the movie now, we have reconstructed the Ark of the Covenant. You see the reconstruction, it's a very sophisticated electrical machine, a very dangerous thing. So that's what you see in the movie. Or in the movie, naturally, you have the best shots ever made on this planet concerning the plain of Nazca, or concerning just what we talked, that man, or concerning Easter Island, because on Easter Island you don't have only statues. Everybody is just speaking about those statues, wonderful, but we have lots of other things. In the crater, Raku, you have gods chiseled out of stone and such things which have never been showed, and those gods with flying machines on flying bulls. Or we have, for example, in Japan, a cave painting which you see exactly an aircraft, but there is no doubt it is an aircraft. Anyhow, in the movie, finally, at the end of the movie, I make a question marks I ask again, have we been visited from outer space? Because the movie was made 2.5 years ago.
But what I have noticed that it seems difficult, even people that read these books, and I talk to people also in this field, and people that are just sitting there watching television, it seems really difficult for them to believe these theories.
A lot of indications of holy books, mythologies, legends, a lot of indications in archaeological facts, but finally each indication is a question of interpretation. Now, archaeologists or scholars who expose biblical scriptures, they explain the same thing as I explain in their way. The difference is just that their way is yesterday's ways.
To introduce something that says, well, toss out those history books because what you've read isn't all there. And it seems to threaten people. But if this is the case, do you think that people will be able to receive this information?
I'm sure, especially the young generation. I mean, you are very young, I am young too, and our fathers, they have done a wonderful world, they have created a wonderful world for us, but the time has passed, and I'm sure the young generation will fully understand this because they will have a new method and a new way of learning as our fathers had.
Greetings, my brethren, as Manka. I would speak with you at this time about an incident which happened during your early biblical times. As your scientists know, they count but 9 planets in your solar system. In actuality, there are 12. 9 of them visible, 1 destroyed, and 2 not yet discovered. The 1 destroyed is our purpose in speaking. A war of nuclear weapons grew to great proportions. We of the Confederation, bound by the laws of our unity, could not intervene in this situation.
Of course, we just have the communications from this intelligence, and they've indicated that humanity has a free will, and that we can do pretty much what we want to do with our own environment, our own world. But if we do something that is going to affect another world or another type of humanity, another order of being, then we probably won't be permitted to do that again.
Well, this is an example of an extra-physical times. There have been reports, at least from prehistory and to recorded history, that these beings have been contacting the Earth. What actually are the first recorded photographs that you know about of extraterrestrial visitors or UFOs?
A UFO, an unidentified flying object, was taken in 1917 on the 13th of October at Fatima, Portugal.
Fatima. I think the Catholic religion has a legend about the apparition that appeared at Fatima. Was there also a UFO at that time?
Yes. The legend coincides with the date and place. There was some previous sightings leading up to this, and word had gotten out that an apparition was taking place. Now, this was a beautiful woman, alleged to be the Virgin Mary, making an appearance in the air, standing on some bushes, and it was seen by some young children there. This was a spherical object, a flattened spheroid, that rotated on a vertical axis and also circled over this large crowd of people in the fields. A densification of the object, the same photo taken by Mr. Fendria. It shows the object that passed over the people, and it radiated enough heat and light that it actually dried the clothes of the people standing in the mud. Now, at the same time, the apparition appeared to the children. That is the legend in the Catholic Church. The story of these people at this time who had little experience with UFOs was that the sun came through the clouds, and this was part of the miracle. However, Greenwich Observatory in London recorded the sun in the same place, the same time, right on schedule over Greenwich at 12 o'clock, high noon, the time of the photograph.
What other sightings were there? I know during the war there's been reports that fighter bombers had seen UFOs.
Yes, back in 1939, the Japanese first noticed them over in their observing their bomber formations over China, 39 and 40. They were reported by combatants from then on. The Americans thought that the Germans had a secret weapon. The Germans thought the Americans had a secret weapon. A strange craft. Here's a dark one pursuing some Sally bombers over China.
But what about some of those that perhaps newspaper people have taken?
Well, here's one that Mr. George Stock, a newspaper photographer from Passaic, New Jersey, took. He was cleaning his camera in the backyard of his house when he heard a hum, looked up and saw a strange object approaching. He had a 4x5 press camera. He slipped the film cartridge into it and he snapped 4 pictures of this object. It approached, passed over his house, and flew over the yard, and leaving the yard. By now he's excited and he's running after it. He's got the camera tilted in all angles and excitedly trying to get as many pictures as possible. 2 large cloud-shaped objects that are following a Japanese All Nippon Airways passenger transport, and the leading cloud-shaped object had launched a little dark sphere that flew towards the jetliner, then circled away and flew off in the distance. They didn't see it return to the mothership. But this is one case of a larger craft seen to discharge an object, and the object is photographed in relationship with the mothership. Here in this photo, you see the little dark object in the middle of the picture, and the light
had reported to the Aerial Phenomenal Research Organization, which is a worldwide organization which handles reports from all over the world by people who have sighted, professionals, scientists, physicists.
Yes, we have representation in 50 different countries, and at the moment we aren't getting much from overseas because I guess there's so much activity in the States. It's sort of obscured what may be happening elsewhere for the time being. But the activity seems to be largely in the southwest, southeast, largely in the southeast, mostly all east of the Mississippi at the time. And I can just give an idea of what is happening. In Mississippi also, we have a case involving the so-called angel's hair, where UFOs were seen at a sort of a high altitude, and filmy silvery substance came floating down to Earth. This has been reported in quite a few other cases, and we have quite a bit of it this time being kept under refrigeration. And I think we'll subject that to gas chromatography tests and mass spectrography and so on, and try to determine what it is.
There are 3 analyses that I know of that have been made of this substance, and it seems to be a boron silicate, which very closely approximates spun glass in consistency. Surrounding the UFOs when they're under heavy power, it seems to originate with an increase of power in connection with it.
There's been a lot of reports, especially in the United States lately, of unidentified flying objects. What is the sudden increase of reports that you've had at the Aerial Phenomenal Research Organization?
Well, I think it's what we would call a flat condition. We've had quite an increase of reports, and they seem to be a substantial type report. In other words, we have reports of people having close encounters or near flyovers and this sort of thing. I think we all have heard about the Pascagoula, Mississippi case, where 2 men that were fishing reported that a UFO came down about 40 feet from them and then floated out and floated them aboard and examined them. It's really a wild-sounding story, but we sent one of our consulting staff, Dr. Harder, in there to interview those people, and he came away convinced that they were describing a real occurrence to the best of their ability.
What are some of the details about that particular incident?
The men, as I said, were fishing at an abandoned shipyard a little up the Pascagoula River from an operating shipyard where these men work. They were fishing not for sport but for food, and it was late at night, about 11 o'clock. They said that this object came down near the ground, about 40 feet from them, and the older man, the younger of the two, fainted early in the incident, and he can't tell us too much about it. Mm-hmm. The older man said that he felt like jumping in the river to get away, but he couldn't. Then he said that some beings that looked roughly humanoid, he described them as having wrinkly, silvery skin, pointed ears, slits for eyes, slit for mouth, pointed nose, and hands, no hands, they were claws. They were two opposed digits that grasped like a pincher. And he said when those pinchers, when they floated over near them and those pinchers grabbed them, that they were weightless and they just floated aboard. Like I say, it sounds like science fiction. But then science fiction writers have told us that the activities of an advanced culture would seem like magic to us. Well, this certainly fills that bill. But under hypnosis, you see, these men were regressed. They became panicky all over again, the sort of thing that can't really be simulated. And I think one of the deputies there stated it quite well in folksy terms. He said, if it wasn't a real thing, then those guys ought to be in Hollywood. He says, they couldn't be that excited without something happening.
Is there any reason that you feel that we have to fear these UFOs and perhaps the beings that are occupying these space objects?
Well, the evidence seems to indicate that we don't have anything to fear. They've been here for a long time, probably as long as we've been here. They haven't done anything to us yet, as far as we know. Nobody's been harmed. And they haven't taken over the world or any country. I don't think there's anything to fear at this point. If they were going to do something, they could have done it long ago. I think that Mr. Däniken was more on the track when he's describing an order of intelligence that is concerned about our development, probably senior brothers of ours, spiritually and more highly evolved and with greater technologies that have gone through a phase of evolution that we are now in and are aware of the pitfalls of our evolving technology and are concerned about our development. Here's an example of two craft that approached a man, Mr. Augusto Aranda, over Yungay, Peru. That's on Mount Huascaran. If you remember the earthquake that we had, I believe it was about 2 years ago, where the mudslide came down the valley and completely wiped out this little town of Yungay and all of its residents. They approached him, passed overhead, separated and circled back. Here's another one of them circling, and circled around and passed out over the valley, and then rejoined and flew away.
Recently on the California coast around Half Moon Bay, it was reported by a trained observer, a policeman, and several other people that there was a fireball shot supposedly from an unidentified flying object into the Half Moon Bay area. And it has been theorized by other scientists studying the crust being so thin in that particular area that perhaps these unidentified flying objects and the beings manning them were firing a fireball into the water to perhaps warm the water and prevent a major earthquake in that area. Have you heard any of these theories projected, and what do you feel about it?
No, I hadn't heard that theory. I would like to report something that we received quite a few years back, preceding quite a disastrous earthquake in Caracas, Venezuela. Just preceding the time of that earthquake, UFOs were reported entering the ocean off the Venezuelan coast and leaving, disc-shaped UFOs. So there may be a concern among them about the stability of the Earth's crust. I wouldn't know. There does seem to be that indication that would be one of their concerns.
Mississippi, for instance, these crafts purposely allowed themselves to be sighted to arouse public comment. In other areas of the United States, ships, manned and unmanned, to my belief, are patrolling the fault lines and the magnetic lines of this planet to stabilize certain situations to perhaps help keep the planet together. Out here in California during recent days, there has been a great deal of activity along the Monterey Peninsula and all the way from Carmel to San Francisco to stabilize the fault area.
One of our consultants has brought up the idea that mankind is just on the verge of becoming a highly technical society, and that this is probably the most dangerous area in man's development. He thinks it's a threshold that's very difficult to cross, the likelihood being that an intelligent race reaching this stage of advancement might destroy itself, thinking specifically of the atomic bomb and things of that sort. He thinks that to a visiting species that has passed that stage, that this would be a very interesting stage in the development of a planet to watch, and they might be here observing for that reason.
Well, in our past recorded history about UFOs, it's been said that there's been times where these beings have contacted certain leaders of certain nations and have warned them about our particular development in technology and the negative use of nuclear weapons and this type of thing. Do you think that perhaps they're returning for any purposes like this with these recent sightings and landings?
Well, I think that these stories of contact are always open to question. They usually appear in scriptural material and very seldom have any historical backing that you're able to trace. I would rule out that possibility, but I would say that evidence up to this time indicates that they're here for their purposes and not for ours.
Trinidad Island, by the way, is a downrange monitoring station for the V-2 missiles that we fired from Cape Kennedy down off the coast of Africa in our studies of ballistic trajectories leading up to our space efforts. And there was quite a bit of activity, UFO activity, along this track, and they were observed to be following the missiles as they were shot downrange. This is one of the key monitoring stations being reopened, and this craft is observing the reopening of the station.
Also, there were reports several years ago in the 50s about flying saucers coming around white sands and white plains where they did the atomic testing. What do you feel about that?
Well, there were some interesting experiences there. They followed the high-altitude research rockets. They would fire a rocket from the ground, and of course they went out at a very high speed, like thousands of miles an hour, and small craft would be observed approaching horizontally, change course, and follow the rocket vertically a distance, and this was watched through theodolite cameras, and even photographs were taken. I don't have any of them.
Also, aren't there some photographs by NASA of unidentified flying objects, even when our own astronauts were out in space?
Well, we've seen some photographs that were allegedly taken by the astronauts, yes. NASA's only released a couple, though. And they were published in Life magazine, but they have more.
So they do seem to be sort of checking on our own technological development. And could this be the purpose of one of the purposes for their visitation to Earth?
They seem to be concerned with our developing science, yes. They've been observed in close proximity to scientific endeavors. A UFO was photographed hovering over the Rocketdyne testing of the Saturn launch rockets when they were being designed, the ones that carried the moon teams to the moon. And that was one of our greatest technological undertakings. Those were fantastic rockets for us at the time. And there was a lot of activity around that.
I've noticed that there has been sort of a groundswell of interest over the years that's progressed very slowly. But I think that now we're confronted with a situation where the government credibility is a very low ebb. And people are discounting the previous government studies that have said there's really nothing to this. And also the situation on the Earth is such that I think people are glad to entertain the idea that this may not be the best there is. It's sort of a diversionary thing in these troubled times, I guess.
Here's one taken over in Missouri by an old gentleman. He's an old man. He had been trying to take a picture of a puppy and a kitten playing on the back patio of his house. And they scattered, and he looked up and he saw that object rising and pulling those spheres up behind it.
It looked like it has sort of a tripod underneath. Are those smaller ships, or is those some type of landing gear?
It was extended and being retracted, whatever it was, and the object accelerated as it rose. It rose ever faster until it left as a streak of light.
Now, are they actually there in physical form, or do they disappear? Are they speeding away in terms of velocity?
Well, whatever they were observing, their observation finished. They do blink out, though, and they do suddenly emerge. Here's a big island off the coast of Brazil back in 1958, 16th of January 1958. Special studies being made all around the world at that time. And a survey ship, an official Brazilian Navy survey ship, was taking a crew to Trinidad Island here, and they observed an object approaching from the sea, and it passed parallel to the ship's course and behind some rocks over the island itself here. And all of the people aboard the craft watched this object for a matter of a minute and a half or so as it passed. It flew behind the hill. Here you see an enlargement of it just before it passed behind the rock to the left. It was a flattened spheroid again. Average reporting would indicate that they range from about 15 feet diameter up to about 35 or 40 feet in diameter in one class. Then there's another group that starts at about 90 feet in diameter to 110. And then there's another class larger than that that ranges from 200 to 300 feet in diameter. And that's a mighty big craft in the sky.
When I think that it was only about 100 years ago that we moved from the Wright brothers into space, it isn't so hard to imagine that astronauts from other worlds are already traveling the universe in sophisticated aircraft. If these beings manning UFOs got their start in aviation maybe thousands or millions of Earth years ago, it is no wonder that they're out there and we see them. But I wonder what one of our own pioneers in aviation would think.
Well, my interest began about 23 years ago when I was active in the aerospace industry. Our chief test pilot, Max Stanley, who had had a tremendous amount of previous aircraft experience, was making a trip back from Albuquerque to Los Angeles, to Hawthorne, to our plant there. And he and two very knowledgeable observers saw a UFO which could not be explained by any of the techniques that we knew then or know now. They were able to keep this object under observation for a period of about 20 minutes. And of course, with people of that character, the chance of any hoax or any misleading statements or anything of this sort just simply doesn't exist. These were top technicians who had the opportunity firsthand. Personally, I have never seen a UFO or had any contact with anyone who has other than Mr. Stanley. But I had complete and have complete confidence in him, and I know what he reported was actually there. Well, starting with that interest then, it became a natural thing to read up on what I could here and there in the other place, and my belief in the fact that there are UFOs, so-called, has been reinforced through the years by what I've read. A great incentive to believe, which occurred in 1950. So that's about the size of it.
Well, you know, it really seems like these UFOs move in very strange patterns. They're able to hover, almost standing still, and then zoom off. It seems as if they must be utilizing some other form of energy that perhaps we don't know about. Now, in terms of our present, aerodynamic technology, do you feel that we're utilizing all that we can?
Aircraft are thoroughly modern and up-to-date based on our present knowledge. But there is absolutely no question in the world but what there is not only a source of power of which we're not acquainted, but there is also a source of propulsion which we're not acquainted, because the UFOs seem to have unlimited power, which perhaps we might attain if we develop fusion. Fusion power is more or less goes on forever. Fission that we're using now utilizes the elements to a certain extent, but fusion recreates the material that's used. And perhaps a small fusion power plant would give you the power necessary. But the propulsion of these UFOs is unique. Their ability to hover, their ability to accelerate very rapidly, their ability to move at very high speeds, very much higher than anything that we have achieved even with our supersonic aircraft. All of these things, and particularly interestingly without sonic booms and the things that we don't like about our supersonic aircraft, all of these things indicate a type of propulsion which is unique, different than anything we know anything about, and which would be of tremendous value if we could develop it and use it. And that's the reason I feel, with a number of others who have studied it, that it is a subject which deserves the highest type of scientific study and at an early date. The advantages to be gained are perfectly enormous.
Well, since you have designed a number of aircraft since the early days and throughout the war, such as the Flying Wing, would you say that flying saucers are aerodynamically sound?
I don't believe they are aerodynamically powered. I don't think that there is any aerodynamic particular value to their shapes. They come in a number of different shapes, all the way from a flattened sort of pumpkin shape, flattened sphere like a pumpkin, to elongated sort of cigar shapes, to the well-known flying saucer shape, which consists of a saucer with another inverted on the top of it. And this type accounts for about 50%. But the flight characteristics of all of the different shapes are similar. In other words, they've all been seen to accelerate rapidly, to be able to stop, to be able to turn rapidly, to be able to hover at will anywhere they want to go, so that the type of sustension, propulsion, whatever it is, that enables them to behave in the fashion they do is something that we simply have no technical background for at the present time.
Well, Mr. Northrop, how do you feel about the general ridicule that people are accorded that are into the study or believe in UFOs?
Well, there has been a great deal of ridicule directed to the subject of UFOs, and probably rightly so to a certain extent, because probably 85 to 90% of the sightings of UFOs are not really unidentified flying objects. In other words, there is an answer to approximately 90% of the sightings that are made, which correspond to the present techniques that we have. There remains a 10% to 15% number, which cannot be explained by any of our present science. So that there's a natural reason to a certain extent for ridicule. And don't forget that the Wright brothers and Fulton and everybody, the man who invented the first steam engine, all were ridiculed. They didn't want to leave the horses or the buggies or anything of that sort. So it's a natural thing for humans to ridicule something that they don't understand. But the subject of UFOs has pulled in the serious study of many highly competent technical people. Many doctors of science have studied and fully believe in UFOs. And the number of these is sufficiently great and their reputation is sufficiently high so that there really, in my humble estimation, there's no room left for ridicule. It just doesn't belong in this subject if we're talking about genuine UFOs.
And how long do you feel it will be before we are flying in UFOs?
Well, this probably is a $64 question without a question of a doubt. I think it depends a great deal on how rapidly we take them seriously and how soon we really set up a scientific study team to work on the subject. We have records of thousands and thousands of sightings, and those could be correlated and arranged in a suitable fashion by the use of modern computers, so that we could probably learn a great deal that we don't understand now simply by that type of a study. Whether that would lead us to a solution of what the power is and what the propulsion method is, I simply don't know. It can be anywhere from 10 years to 10,000 as far as I can see right now. But I do believe that it's something that is realistic, something that is tremendously valuable, something that we ought to study as soon and as rigorously as it can possibly be arranged for.
Science today really has been bridging time by speed, and for the past 100 years, we've really been able to move from the Wright brothers airplanes to 747s and jets, and even to our own lunar modules that go to the moon. I guess you might say around the world in 80 days to around the world in 90 minutes.
That's about the size of it.
But we've learned to move through time so rapidly that it seems really possible that if we have developed our knowledge so that we can move through time at these speeds, like Ezekiel landing his spaceship in biblical times, that it must be feasible that other intelligence could have possibly developed this.
Well, it's not only feasible for others to develop it, but we already, in published papers by respectable scientists, have shown that it's feasible for us to plan trips to nearby stars and expect the round-trip time to be shorter than the average person's lifespan, and without violating any of the laws of physics. And a lot of people are shocked by that. And if you figure we can do that with 100 years of technology behind us, then surely somebody else who's been around a little longer, we've got a cosmic time scale to expand. 5 billion years for the solar system, give or take a little, maybe 10 or 15 billion years for the galaxy, and who knows how much for the universe. So if they got started on their technological kick of changing how they do things and using new technology a little bit before we did, they may have been traipsing around between the places for millions of years.
What is really the difference between Earth time and the cosmic time scale?
Well, part of it is our own limited sense of vision. A year seems like a long time. And part of it is that we casually sort of forget something that Einstein showed us, that, crazy as it sounds, if you go close to the speed of light, which is only 670 million miles an hour, that's a nice clip. If you go close to the speed of light, time slows down. And it slows down a lot the closer you get to the speed of light. For example, if you wanted to go to a star that was, say, 40 light years away, which is just down the street, it's in our neighborhood, you might say, in a galactic scale. If you were going 99% of the speed of light, and it would only take a year at 1g acceleration, which we can stand because we're always exposed to it, to get to that speed. At that speed, it would only take you about 9 or 10 months to go 40 light years. If you go a little faster, say 99.9% of the speed of light, and we have made particles in the laboratory that go faster than that, and nature has too, then you could do it in under a month, pilot time. So the whole universe is within reach if you can go close to the speed of light. And becoming an astronaut then becomes a recipient of the gift of immortality. Because you go out and you don't age much, and you come back and everybody's a lot older.
Well, this seems to be involved with using energy in perhaps
That's
a way
the key.
that we haven't utilized it before.
Well, we seem bent on using energy for not very peaceful purposes. The big discoveries have all been turned into ways to kill people, but the same techniques that are used in A-bombs and H-bombs, fission and fusion systems, can be used to develop propulsion systems. I've worked on fission and fusion propulsion systems, and with these, with our limited knowledge today, this is what makes these trips to nearby stars feasible.
Well, could it be that our space brothers are watching us today and perhaps have been observing us since ancient times?
It seems clear that we could have been marked on somebody's maps, stellar maps, you know, 1 million years ago, nice place to visit, wouldn't want to live there kind of thing. And they could be keeping tabs on us, or they could be coming here to vacation. They could be coming here for as many different reasons as people visit from Los Angeles to New York. Fun reasons, business reasons, people reasons, philosophical reasons. And yes, certainly some of them would be keeping their eye on Earthlings for an obvious reason. Anybody coming here now would certainly recognize a primitive society whose major activity is tribal warfare, whether we like it or not. That's the way it boils down to. And so with that notion, anybody would want to know when we're going into outer space, because if we take our own brands of sociology and friendship, namely hostility, shoot first, ask questions later, is an earthling viewpoint, apparently, I think they'd want to know about it. You know, post the policeman, make sure those guys either stay down there or learn how to be adult earthlings instead of the primitive society they are.
Well, Stanton, you really do believe that UFOs exist?
I'm convinced, after 14 years of study and investigation, that the evidence is simply overwhelming that planet Earth is being visited by intelligently controlled extraterrestrial vehicles, some flying saucers or somebody else's spaceship.
Well, where is this data? Why haven't we seen this investigated before?
It's kind of funny. There's an enormous amount of information. There are 5 large-scale scientific studies that I discuss in my lectures that provide us, every one of them, and most of them government-sponsored, incidentally, provide us with a mass of information that would convince anybody who took the trouble to study it that some of these things are indeed real. But there are really several reasons, I think, at least in my traveling and talking to lots of people. The first problem is that they won't take the trouble to study it. The skeptics invariably are ignorant of the data. You'll hear all kinds of foolish statements about why aren't they seen on radar? They are. Why haven't they been seen by astronauts? They have been. None of those objections stand up when you look at the data. There's another problem, though, and that's the laughter curtain, the fear of ridicule. It's amazing how powerful that fear of ridicule is in terms of people's lives. Most sightings don't get reported. I check everywhere I speak, and I find 4 to 10% of the people have seen a UFO. I say, how many of you reported what you saw? If I'm lucky, 1/10, 1/20 of those have reported what they have seen. The third problem has to do really with ego, man's feeling of importance. You know, if they were coming here, they'd want to talk to us, say the members of the National Academy of Sciences. News editors from newspapers and television stations say they'd come here, they would obviously have a press conference. They haven't called one, you know. The fourth reason is up my alley. As a nuclear physicist working on crazy far-out propulsion systems for most of my professional life, it's a complete unwillingness to use our knowledge of technology to try to understand UFOs, figure out how they work. People wonder why bother with UFOs. The technological end is certainly one. Right now, we certainly worry about the traffic situation, the pollution problem, the energy crisis. What would it mean to mankind, to all of us Earthlings, if we had a system that could duplicate UFO behavior, up, over, and down, without noise, without pollution, without carrying along something you throw away, without burning up vital resources? You'd think that with our spending a few $1 billion on advanced propulsion systems like the space shuttle and VTOLs and all these other things, that the money might very well be better spent trying to figure out how these characters fly their machines and what's going on there. Because that's one practical benefit. You could grow things, you can dig things out of the ground in a place without having to build roads or railroads. The problems on the world are really a kind of distribution problems. We do have one planet. There's another practical end, kind of a dollar-saving end. As a taxpayer, this concerns me. We are committed to searching for life in outer space. There was one study done, they want to spend $6 to $10 billion to build a big radio telescope, listen for signals because somebody's undoubtedly sending and all that sort of thing. And I think for under $1 million, we could find out about intelligent creatures coming here rather than the television commercials from another star system. Perhaps the biggest reason, though, the biggest practical benefit for mankind in a pragmatic world would be for us to learn to recognize that we all do have something in common. From an alien's viewpoint, it's one dinky planet. We are all Earthlings. You ask somebody now, who are you? I'm an American, I'm Russian, I'm Chinese, black, white, male, female, all these other divisive sort of things. What we really ought to be saying is, I'm an Earthling. And from their viewpoint, it must seem very strange that we don't act as if we were all on the same planet, as if we were separated rather than part of a small picture on an unimportant place out in the boondocks. And so I think that's the biggest possible benefit, to avoid war in the future, to solve mankind's problems, so that we don't have the foolish business of paying some people not to produce food when not very far away on a cosmic scale there are people starving. I think we need to start to think of ourselves as Earthlings.
galactic systems sigh to a frozen halt in space, do you think there will be some remnant of beauty of the human race? Do you think there will be a vestige, or a sniffle, or a cosmic tear? Do you think a greater thinking thing will give a damn that man was here?